I'm trying to give some backstory.
I know.
I'm sorry.
We have to at least eventually try and restart the thing.
Let's try this one.
I'm sorry for snapping at you. You were doing your job.
I'm not the moderator.
You're not the moderator?
No,
That's what Taylor said.
no, I'm the moderator actually. That's the wild.
Okay.
If you guys don't know the dynamic of our friendship, I am basically the friend moderator in the group. And so when this panel came out and I was not the moderator, everybody's been like, "You're not the moderator." I'll let them
They gave me that power. It was like, oh, okay, all right. So.
Taylor, please.
Chaos.
Magic pipe.
Is this one louder? Is this one?
They're both mine. Stop it. Put the mic down. Let Lathan do his job.
All right. Well, welcome to the Mouth of Madness. I mean, welcome to Blaxploitation. What it is. We're gonna change how I describe this panel, like since the first panel we were on this weekend. So yeah, this is a panel where we're going to be discussing the genre of Blaxploitation. And I feel like whenever we're talking about things that are racially themed in this country, we often have to do it about that there has been an extremely powerful and effective system that has put one group of people ahead of so many others. Yet, what I like about Blaxploitation is that this is the place where the white people fucked up. Because the idea of exploitation films was we need to like keep making money. I need to like this is like very much into the 50s all the way going into the 80s. We need ways to maintain like tax write-offs for the theater spaces that we are using and the rent that we're paying for it. So there was a lot of cases of simply giving space for low-budget projects, low-budget film projects, and so directors, actors, writers were able to like get in and make their own films, which would then be like shown in like cheap theaters, redistributed for like a bit of a profit, which makes sense. It's an extra little bit of write-off. But the problem was they gave a bunch of people the ability to tell their own stories in their own ways. And you get all kinds of types of exploitation genres, but we're talking about, and specifically, you get Blaxploitation. There's a whole series of movies that you've heard of, Shaft, Blackula, like Superfly, all like Dolomite, all of these things. These are things that were created in this particular space. Part of this really great tradition of like independent film storytelling that completely kind of changed a lot of like the world perspective in terms of film. I would say that probably one of my like earliest exposures was actually Enter the Dragon, which has so much of this particular exploitative quality to it, but then went on to become like a really major iconic film. And also introduced me to Jim Kelly, who I then pursued his movies like relentlessly for the next several years.
And I do agree that there was exploitive nature with it, but it also gave a large group of people here to see themselves represented in a way that you weren't before, when it was minimal representation or bit parts. And so now it gave me that go to say, well, if I can be this character, I can be all these other characters as well. And a few years ago, I did an interview with Antonio Forrest. And I remember when I was talking to him, so if you're not familiar, the thing that most people know him in this room probably is he played Huggy Bear on Starsky and Hutch, the series. And one of the things I found one, he's a fantastic actor and a wonderful human being. But one of the things that I found most wonderful about this interview process is that there was a variety of ages of people who were attending, just like at this event right now. And to be able to talk to my ancestors who are a decade or so older than me, and how appreciative they were of being able to come home and see themselves on TV when they didn't feel that they had that representation before, or it was only in spurts. And so just how, even though it was the character that wasn't, he still was a pimp and kind of like the do-good villain, but he still was a community leader. And so to be able to come and see that represented, I think that that's a lot of what the whole Blaxploitation movement was able to do, where it's like, okay, well maybe we're still being used in a way that benefits the prevailing culture, but we're here and we're front and center, and there are still ways that we're being shown that are not completely fetishized. We're not completely, there's still opportunities, and there's opportunities for actors and work, when before there may not have been a lot of that work as well. So there's still lots of holes to be punched in the entire movement, but I think that if we hadn't had that, we wouldn't be able to get where we were.
Yeah. And another thing, oh wait, what'd you say?
Also before I get to that, we're trying to introduce who we all are.
Oh, yes. I just presumed that we weren't doing that.
As an example, for those of you who were here earlier, as an example of the lightly or barely restrained chaos to expect from this. Yeah, it's like, we're going this way, we're doing this, all right, we're doing this, we're going that way.
There's a prequel, there's a sequel, there's a second.
Yes, it's going to be like Memento or like Pulp Fiction, just hot around.
Yes, hi, I'm Lathan. Very big film, comic book, anime fan. I study biophysics and social anthropology. I tend to incorporate those topics into the fiction that I enjoy and talk about. I also do practice a number of martial arts, which I also talk about and incorporating things that I am into. I will talk your ear off about a large number of topics. And you can apply that all here. So let's move along down the line.
My name is Cisco. I write and produce TV shows. Huge fan of cinema and cinematic history. Love it all, especially the subgenres like exploitation. Because what's not to love? It's like soul food, man. It's like they say, you do these three things, you said that, filming the best shit you ever had. And we did it. I'm going to stand behind that. We were super groovy. And I love the blend of social political statements with just cool. How many kids here? Anybody here not remember something that happened in the year 2000 or 2010? Alright, then you're all done. It's like, we took all this cool shit and we had all these great things to say, but we made it fucking cool because we knew we couldn't compete with the big budgets. We couldn't do the car crashes like Bullet and Steve McQueen pictures. We couldn't do the special effects like Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Alien, which is all the same. Really, when you think about it, it's all the same time period. So we were like, check it out. We got the map. So you got a pink coat, head to toe, and there's going to be a coalition of heads.
Let me flavor, all these flavors.
Very articulate. It's okay if I say it.
Yes! Use all the buzzwords right now just to get them out in the room. Articulate, well-spoken, they all have beautiful teeth. It's all good. We'll diffuse all those bugs.
And I'm really excited to see like certain traits of the classic or original Blaxploitation movement resurfacing now. And a couple movies I can't wait to talk about that are like 100% Blaxploitation, but also 100% like badass. You should see them. Yes, super good. And I watch the movie every Sunday in theaters. Have since 1998. Woo! Because I'm very lonely.
That's not a habit. That's a commitment.
Right.
Do not make yourself smaller, brother. You don't gotta shrink yourself for nobody. Yeah, no, that is a commitment.
Yes.
You made out. Sure. I'm Gregory. I'm a big goofball, and I just still
Actor,
like
improviser.
Talking about dipping your own legs.
Exactly.
Thank you, Shannan, for calling me out. I'm an actor, improviser, clown, physical comedian. I'm on a weird writing hiatus for well over a decade. But I still say I'm a writer. And I just love, I've always loved consuming visual media since I was a kid. Like my folks, I don't know why, I don't know how long, but they, once they could get cable, we had cable, and my parents turned us on to so much crap. There was stuff that they sat us down in front of the television to watch, but then there was stuff that they were just like, if you're watching TV, when they weren't saying, when we didn't have chores or when we were outside running around, we could watch Vanguard Ace on Kansas City 21. We could watch whatever, Godzilla on WGN, or they would sit us down and we would watch Uptown Saturday Night, or Which Way Is Up, or Stir Crazy, or any of those. So yeah, as you were talking, I was just thinking, I was like, I've really been a media consumer, just like filling my bag with random stuff. So yeah, like sometimes I don't even remember what I've taken in until some panel like this, and I'm just like, oh yeah.
Cool. All right, hi everyone. I'm Miss Shannan Paul. I'm a comedian, corporate speaker. Thank you very much for the push-up in the back of the room. I'm also a voice actor and radio and TV host hubbing out of here in the Twin Cities. I grew up in South Phoenix, Arizona in the 1970s by a Black single mom, and so we lived a lot of this. So much of who I am today is based upon the fact that my mom and I were hanging out watching these things, and she helped me become that book reader nerd and exposed me to a lot of different media. So it might be one of these films, but it was also the first movie I remember taking me to was Star Wars, and being able to have all those experiences. So a variety of different media that was out there that showcased different things that you could be and fostered creativity is all due to my mom. So I am happy to be here today to talk about this. I do like being in the space. I'm also the Diversity and Community Relations Director for the Twin Cities Film Fest. And like being able to help platform storylines that are about this and opening conversations to people. So thank you all for being here today as we continue this conversation that we are chaotic neutral and we were running all over this. But if, and I'm jumping on Lathan's territory, one of the great things they did this year here at, shut up, Jim. They all knew this was gonna happen, but we are all quite chaotic, but one of the great things about CONvergence is that it is monopolized dialogue. So if you would like to get your voice into the room, one of the great things they did this year is you'll see a variety of colored sheets of paper throughout the room. So it'll help if you do want to get into the conversation, if you want to raise that. It makes it easier for a moderator to go ahead and call on you, and also make sure that we respect you and we don't misname or misgender anybody who's here. So thank you all for joining us.
I think the appropriate term is sheets of color now.
Sheets of color. Why so?
Alright, so I feel like I'm watching Arrow where it's like 15 minutes in and we just not get to the actual intro panel. It's been like, they got songs, so it's like dun 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 dun. Okay, yeah. Alright, well I think a good place to start off would be what are like one or two of our favorite Blaxploitation films, and what about those films do we think kind of really defines the genre? I'll start. One of my favorites, particularly for just how over the top it is Black Samson.
Okay, yeah.
Where it is about, and this I feel like has all the great elements of Blaxploitation. From the main character, he runs a club I forget if it's in Harlem. He runs a club, bar, strip club. He is formally educated, but he is very much Black community educated as well. He is very African in how he dresses, how he moves. He has a pet lion. Most of the movie is just this lion just hanging out in the bar, walking around with him. He walks around with this big staff, and he beats the crap out of drug dealers trying to come into the community. One of the things that I was always drawn to as a kid were intelligent, communicative, protagonists. I was very much Incredible Hulk, Quantum, characters who their main goal is to try to work things out through reason, but if necessary, then we're not going to kick somebody's ass. This was something I saw a lot in a lot of Blaxploitation characters, where they were very thoughtful and they were very much not going to be sold any kind of BS. And I really loved that particularly in Black Samson. This is also an example where this was a very well educated and very capable and well-known community leader who was keeping out negative elements that were also just not there was not other Black people, but it was like the Italian mafia was coming and trying to bring drugs. It was very much, I would say, more centered on more of where the money and power and negative influence was really coming from at the time, and that was something that was very, very different to see as opposed to like any action movie where like where 90% of your red henchmen are black people getting like their ass kicked. Yeah, that's, and then, and I would also say coffee, but I feel like I need to like have a whole other section.
And I'm going to say that one. So
So, yeah, see?
I'll take coffee. Good passing of the baton. I wasn't going to, but I was going to say coffee. And if you're familiar with coffee, coffee is the lovely, beautiful, and talented Pam Grier. As the protagonist, she plays a nurse who's seen her community rampage by drugs and heroin and decides that she's going to go on her own vigilante killing spree. So she goes underground as a prostitute and starts taking out bad guys. And I just loved so much of this because I think a lot of, even in the Blaxploitation genre, there were still a lot of those heteronormative and female tropes. So you still didn't see a lot of strong female characters, and then you had Coffee, who was, especially when we continue to unspool what goes on here in our American society, not only as a person of color, but also as a woman of color, and the additional layers of history and trauma that you might have. Coffee was one of those things that said, oh, no, we're gonna do all of these things all in one place. And I think that's a great example when we say that female-driven movies can't have a following. And I was like, well, we made coffee in the 70s. And so you just need to make some coffee now, stop putting all the cream in it, we'll be okay. But that's one that I always come back to when I'm just trying to do, you love this. And I just keep playing that till I got it. But it was really important to me, as, a young girl who was very much in that feeling of othered and trying to figure out where you're doing and in these exhaustive spaces where I already felt like I had to be the most. Like, if you're gonna be the only black kid in this thing, you have to be all this stuff. So being able to have these films that you can lean back on and go, no, there's other situations where you wouldn't feel so othered was very freeing and like a little emotional vacation for me. And so as flawed as these movies were, that was what Coffee was for me.
I mean, Coffee. Yes, Coffee was top of my list too, but not for the right reasons. I mean, like in my defense, like you were like, oh, I like tall guys, I like short girls, like Pam Grier is everybody's type.
Yeah.
And I'm not an exception. But I'll jump and say I'm gonna go with cut because it is one of my favorites. Cotton Comes to Harlem.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was the first one, 1970. Jimi Hendrix passed away, and I'm like, fuck this noise, let's get serious. Because there's certain traits of Blaxploitation that run throughout every film. It's usually some kind of besides obviously drama with black cast, from black stories, featuring standout black protagonists or protagonists, plural. And they're kind of anti-hero vibe, and usually seeking justice, seeking vengeance, but all the while on the cutting edge of hip, right? That sounds like I wrote it.
Yeah. It's good.
But Cotton Comes to Harlem has everything, and for me, what really does it is that from the 1930s, when we first started appearing in films, official films, it's 1960s, we have what's called servitude roles, basically. We could drive the cars, we could hold the doors, we could clean the house, we take care of the kids. That's about it. Or occasionally we could save Miss Scarlet.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it has Lisa Free.
Yeah.
You should all do that impression of me, we were saying.
Just drop it in the conversation. Yes.
But with Cotton Comes to Harlem, that was like a direct allegory because it literally is about this guy named O'Malley. I don't know why he's Irish, but he's selling wolf tickets, like literal wolf tickets, where he's trying to get the community to buy tickets to go back to Africa. And they're bullshit tickets. He's a con man. Pardon my French, I saw a short person come in. I don't know if they're younger. There's good teeth. Oh, great.
They live in my house, they've heard worse.
Yes, but that's from you.
That's okay.
And you're related to them. So
You feel free.
okay.
He was a confidence artist who was manipulating the community. And there were these two detectives that I thought was really interesting because they weren't police detectives. Grave Digger and Corpse, or Grave Digger and Body Carrier Stone, was like Jones and Johnson.
Yeah.
And they usually the leads, and they have to kind of like, they want to shut him down, but it turns out he's working with the corrupt cops who are working with the mob, and they've stolen all this money that he's been hiding in a bale of cotton that keeps like traveling around Harlem. And it is a comedy. It's kind of funny, but there's the action, it's a car chase, everyone's super sassy, super hip. But it's that direct line where we're literally seeing, like, we're taking these tropes of like, we are cotton pickers, we are criminals, we are servants, being flipped on its head. and kind of like a big middle finger, or like when you turn this way if you're from Europe. Yeah. But and I dug that a lot because it's sort of like the first episode of Black Mirror. When you watch it, it's about the Prime Minister banging pig, and you're like, that's weird. But then you watch the whole series, you go back and watch it, like, oh shoot, that actually has the elements. It's the thesis statement for the entire series up until the last one, which is not good. And that's kind of what Comics are hard. When you watch it, oh, this is, it's 1970, so it has 1970 pacing, which is really late 60s pacing, which is a lot different from current pacing. So it takes some getting used to if you're not used to watching those kind of movies. But oh man, I think the white girl. I think white girls. They used to call me white girl in college because I haven't done enough of that. You are what you eat. That's it.
Sweet mercy.
I don't slap women anymore.
If you haven't tried,
Stop it. Would you? We're supposed to be.
So am I.
Gregory's hand is left.
It was
Let's talk about it's white exploitation. What was it? That's how Taylor is solving all of the problems. He just takes all the tropes, turns them on their head, and then just exploits white people. We're good.
Condoms around is super dope. It's really good.
My favorite, I'd say like my favorite act was one of the ones that I mentioned actually, that I watched with my parents, or because of my parents was, and I don't know, like this, I group it in with the Blaxploitation genre because it's, it's varied, but it's not really, it doesn't really come up when people are talking about Blaxploitation. They usually talk about, Coffee or Cleopatra Jones, et cetera, et cetera. But Uptown Saturday Night,
Yeah.
and there was a sequel, Let's Do It Again. If you're not familiar with those, it's they're buddy comedies starring, God, I'm just hearing super slap back in my voice, like, am I projecting that much? Holy crap. Back on track. So it stars Sidney Poitier and a problematic former Jello salesman. Pitchman, I'm sorry, pitchman salesman. And it's buddy comedy, and they're each married, and like for starters, even taking into consideration how women were portrayed as spouses in that time in the 70s. So those, taking that into consideration, the wives were painted were portrayed or written in a sort of way where it's not. So like, there was a bit of the black sassy black woman, sassy sister thing, but also it involved their characterization or the way that they played it involved and pointed a finger toward the strength and foundation of black women in predominantly black communities. Like for instance, like one thing that people don't consider about the Black Panthers was exactly how equitably women were held within the seen and held within the Black Panther Party. It wasn't, it wasn't like a women's places in the kitchen sort of thing. It's just like, women are right next to us in the revolution. And, but I digress.
I felt like that was a lot how we got the Dora Milaje and the Black Panther franchise is an homage back to that, which I've never seen John Cooper actually say that, but that was the vibe I got at first. Because I'm like, okay, I see how that was just organically strong. So
that just comes out.
Yeah.
But also, like, it incorporated other things, like they were both lodge members. They were both members of Prince Hall Lodge, which, for anybody who isn't aware of Masonry and societies, benevolent societies in the USA, Prince Hall Lodge was created because black men could not be in Masonic lodges because of racism. And so there was this whole other system. And so they were lodge members, and hijinks ensue. You even have like a young Jimmy Walker in it as a boxer named Boothby Farnsworth And like, it's just really like, they're trying to get a lottery ticket, and the husbands are just being ridiculous, and the wife's just like, come on, would you just like clean your act up? And then there's Booty Farnsworth, and there's hypnotism, like Sidney Poitier hypnotizing Jimmy Walker, so that like when he snaps his fingers, like this wiry, dude who just like can't take a punch, just becomes this bulldog who's like dropping dudes the size of Jim Brown in the ring, and it's just like, yeah. So it's a bloody comedy in Blaxploitation bloody comedy, and that's for me the like foundational, the door opener.
I think that if we're looking along the timeline of what we were doing in that Blaxploitation era, it had the ability, if it had been continue to find the proper funding and do anything to do what hip hop did and be the longest running niche genre in something that could continue to grow. But I do feel like there were a lot of things that got in the way of having that era be what it was and then shrink, because there were a lot of problematic things that continued to happen within the industry, but there also was, I feel like that was one of those things because it did need, even though it had smaller budgets, it still needed a bigger amount of funding than we did in hip hop and in music and what we're doing in order to have that one survive in the underground. So continuing to move all of these films along and to be able to produce them on the level that they needed to be produced, you still needed to be like, we know that how long were Tollywood and Bollywood films being made that eventually it became and it took over because there was an infrastructure within the country that continued to support that, so it took off. How long did it take for K-pop to take over the universe? Because there was an infrastructure and a support system within the country to take that off. When we're looking at these Black creative films, we never got that full footage because it didn't seem like there was ever a way where a lot of this, even though it still had problematic storylines and other things, but a lot of movies in the 70s had problematic storylines, regardless of what community they were focused on. But there wasn't enough infrastructure throughout the Hollywood community to have this genre takes off. And we continue.
Well, I like that you mentioned hip-hop, because like there's a movie CB4, which could arguably be classified as a Blaxploitation picture, even though it came out in the 90s, not the 70s. Mm-hmm. But the plot of that film, and also, I mean, if you want to stick in the 70s, Great Rock and Roll Swindle, starring the Sex Pistols, is basically the story of the trajectory of Blaxploitation as a subgenre of motion pictures. Because it started out, this is an underground movement, in essence, of Black filmmakers, Black artists, Black actors, etc., making Black content, quote unquote. And then they noticed that this Black content was extremely profitable because it wasn't just Black people saying it. And then that's when they got involved and became corporatized. And you can see a marked decline and there's always going to be good content. But the stuff that was getting pushed, the stuff that was getting a bigger name, was they say, like, well, people stopped watching Blaxploitation from the 70s, so we stopped investing in it. So what happened was you started throwing money at it, trying to duplicate something that you didn't fully understand, the you being the industry, the system that was in place, and then use that as an excuse to kind of derail it. Now, of course, it still subsisted, but that's for later. But I love there's that parallel between hip-hop, because if there was someone there who was like Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, Rick Rubin, who knew enough, like, you know what, we're not on the level, but we know enough to know we don't know enough, so when we step aside, just push somebody forward, or Russell Simmons, can we say his name? Whatever. Like the founders of hip-hop knew enough to get out of the way and let the people who knew what was up do what was up.
And I think some of that shows up in with the studio system and whatever shows up, like with the point with like why did Rudy Ray Moore get to a point where he's like, I gotta make my own movie. We gotta, not just like we gotta make our own movies. And why did Martin Van Peebles like, I gotta make my own movie. We gotta make our own movies. It's like that. That sort of thing, like they were at a point where they were saying that sort of thing already happened. And so, Rudy Ray Moore did what he did to make, the first Dolomite movie, and Van Peebles did everything that he did to make Sweet Sweetback. And, there was a reason why those happened that way. And then that brings me to things like, and before this gets out of my brain, you mentioned CB4, and I just also want to say Fear of a Black Hat. But also, getting back to that though, and then you get people like Robert Townsend, in the 80s, like financing Hollywood Shuffle on his own with credit cards, just like the same thing, Robert Rodriguez did with El Mariachi. The reason why these filmmakers did this, these black filmmakers did this, was for a reason, and it was that creep that happened to hip hop, that happened to jazz, that happened to, everything. It's just like, hey, people are liking this. But also what we saw is, like, if you watch, like, even taking into consideration the taking care of our own community elements of many Blaxploitation movies, or fighting the man elements of those movies, there's a point where that wasn't seen as much anymore, to where you get to the point in the 80s and 90s where Spike Lee is capital C controversial for some of the things that he has in his movies and talks about in his movies, where Justin Simeon is still, we're in freaking 2023, Justin Simeon is still defending the title of his movie in the series, Dear White People, because like all of a sudden it's like, oh no, we don't want to talk about
It's much more controversial when it's actually attacking a structure that doesn't want to be looked at.
Yeah. Like regardless of what that structure is, whether it, regardless of which demographic group it is. Because like if you had, if the same thing were to reach any level of prominence with filmmakers and writers who were all strictly from the broad disability community, talking about ableism, then you'd have people just like, oh, that's just too, It's like, you're just so angry. And any time there's a female filmmaker or female-led crew and they turn the lens on like gender dominance or gender domination, and the more that queer filmmakers do that and the queer-led films do that, that's gonna happen too. And so it's a matter of, it's like, oh, you don't have to be so specific, as long as the man, capital T, capital M, is generic and doesn't actually challenge people, grab them by the shoulders and look them in the eye. It's like, you contribute to this too.
Right.
You might not be aware of it, but you do. As long as you're not doing that, then it's all cool.
That's that beautiful insidiousness, right? Like they're saying, look, we gave you X, Y, Z, and we'll write you big ass checks, and then we'll undercut you in post, or we won't market it. And then we'll say, well, it's not us. We would love to have more non-white, non-straight filmmakers doing stuff. But non-white, non-filmmakers, their movies don't sell. But they don't talk about the fact that their movies aren't marketed. They're not pushed. They don't have the same support. It's a budget structure. It's like non-male, non-white, black films. Like, well, if your name doesn't end with the W, it's W. If your name's not Denzel Washington, or they give us one a year.
And not even one a year, like it really turns into, well, once we have one, and you guys have all heard me talk about that Highlander mentality. Once we have one, then we're good. There can only be one. So we have one prominent film. So right now, it's Jordan Peele. They're like, we gave you Jordan Peele. He's the only one who gets to make movies. Like, well, what about all these other films? What about all these other properties that we can do? And God forbid if you're a black woman, because they're like, she counts as two. We're not making any movies. Everybody sit down. God forbid I, as a queer black woman, come out there, they're like, we're never making another thing again. It's all white males, they're good. We solved everything, she got a job, we're done.
No, I swear, I felt like from childhood, this has always bothered me, and I swear, like, there was like the day that shows up where there's like more than 5 black people who can be making movies or be in movies. It's gonna feel like the greatest Avengers assembly that's ever existed. I want to change this a little bit because it's come up a few times, but I want to turn the concept a little on its head. About the problematic elements of Blaxploitation, but I want to ask you about those elements, but the ways that Blaxploitation has been very self-corrective. Because one of the things you brought up earlier about the Black Panthers was how they were very aware of being inclusive of women. And I remember the history where it's like at first it was like didn't really come up very much, and then someone's like, wait a minute, we're trying to fight racial oppression. Do you think sex oppression might also be bad? Like, that actually, this was the thing where it's like, early on, it's like, maybe we should like address this. And one of the things that comes up is that there's so many, like, sexism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia that are just embedded into all cultures just from a single one. But there's something fascinating about how Blaxploitation in these other films seem much more ready to like break out of those molds. Because I watched movies where the male, where there'd be a lot of sexism, but then I also watch movies where you have these amazing female-driven stories. I watch movies where the male protagonists were very tropey in how their personalities and their emotions, but other ones where it was much more complex. Like,
and then at the end, the woman would slap back or something.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it was created in this Forrest by us mentality. And so, but then it was like, but then how can we get other audiences to watch it so they would, even as savvy filmmakers, add back in the marketability of it? Where it's like, well, I know that this is fetishizing my own characters, but I'm gonna add it back in because that's what will get them to bring their white friends to this film. And that's how I'm gonna get other eyes on it. And so I don't think that the genre even gave itself enough credit to just say, stay the course, and we'll talk about community building, we'll do all that, because it also was, but if I want money for my next movie, I need to give them just a little bit of this. And there was always that one supporter, that one ally, that one person that was sitting there going, I know what you're trying to do here, but you gotta give the people what they want. And so then that aspect would be added back in from the standpoint of necessity to try and continue the filmmaking or the genre or to make it more marketable, so we would add back in that flavor. That, most of our problematic, tropes, regardless of where we are, is because there's this idea, this concept, that that's what the masses want. That's what the prevailing culture wants. That's what's going to get the most people, because that's what we've created because of this bias. So if you want the most people to want to come to this film, this one character needs to at least do this. Throw this one aspect in there. Even though everything else is fine, you gotta give us this one thing. And then once you start crossing those lines, they become more and prevalent and more of those lines. And so I don't think that within Blaxploitation, it had any additional problems in comparison to the other films in the time period that it came out. It just seemed more prevalent because I'm watching somebody who was creating this, and I'm watching a person of color do it to another person of color. Where I'm like, it's bad enough that I had to see this in this other film. I just wanted a little bit more and didn't even know how to articulate it. Because there's lots of stuff now that I'm just like, why did I think that was funny? It's like, because I was 8, And it was funny to the 8-year-old. Now I'm just like, she was stupid. But she was, because she was 8. And so that's where most of my ire of why it wasn't able to continue is that the things that we have now, the Wayans weren't able to do what the Wayans did until they had gone through so many hoops, and they were still funded because they got to do these things.
I think that there's a very difficult and delicate dance throughout history of how do I present something that is authentic, but also make it in a way that is absorbable by both a threat and also someone I'm trying to convince others. Like, you're in this constant negotiation of, do I fight or do I talk it out? Do I make a stand or do I try to give some ground so that we can find some way to resolve something peacefully? And I think in so many of those, there are great choices that are made. Other places where it's just like, at this point, maybe I shouldn't even compromise quite as much. And I think there's often, funny thing, I think there's often this particular quality, especially in Black people, of wanting to try to be the bigger person and wanting to try to give some grace. Grace is something that I think is something really ingrained in our cultural headspace that it can easily go second thought, no, you didn't really need this, I'm gonna do this way, and you're gonna have to put up with it. But I think that very much comes to fruition in a lot of the art and film that we do.
Lathan, can I ask you a question? As the most prolific martial artists of the 4 of us on this panel, because I don't know if Greg and Taylor do some Muay Thai that I don't know about.
It's been years.
Okay, but one of the things that I love about just you as a human being is how much you lean into the martial arts genre and the way that you run that into the Afrofuturist space and all these other things. When you're looking through, because we do have that that action comedy, that martial arts, thing. So I remember being able to watch Sunday Soul, and like that's what they call the black theater, like Sunday Soul. So there was like Kung Fu theater, and then it was Sunday Soul, and I was like, okay, I guess, but I get what you're doing. So as far as like the action films and the fight scenes and all those things, what did you think when you were growing up when you saw those, and did it influence you?
Yeah, it influenced me like a lot. So my earliest exposures, like I had basically two kind of exposures here. There were the sci-fi films. Usually they're like some strange monster was trying to like destroy the world, and you had the scientists who had an actual good logical answer, and the crazy military commanders like just blow it up with all this stuff, and it's like don't do that. And there was always this really like very sad, pathetic fight where the scientist is getting ass whooped by this crazy general. And part of like, I don't want to go out like that. Like, I'm a scientist, but if it comes down to I have to like convince some like really crazy like gun nut to not blow up the monster because it'll like destroy the earth, I need to be able to whoop him quick, push the abort button, and be like done with that. So that was my initial introduction, and then getting into martial arts, watching and seeing movies, and particularly it's like seeing Jim Kelly, seeing Cleopatra Jones, seeing so much of like seeing those movements, seeing how that was incorporated into, particularly also in Blaxploitation, how much martial arts was very much part of a cultural identity and incorporated into how they would interact with the community was very, very influential to me. And also fascinating to learn that so much of our martial arts culture was also driven forward by Black masters. It was, most people did not think like Kung Fu was an effective martial art in the Americas until it was being taught in Black communities where people, unfortunately, had an exposure to violence, but knew how these techniques applied. And they would take these Kung Fu and they would win tournaments. They would win in street fights. And it was these Black martial arts masters that drove forward the popularity of martial arts in this country. And so that was something that was very, very influential to me, was that particular exposure. And the more that I kind of got into it, the more that I began to like, particularly get into like the health and like the personal balance aspects of it. And then I discovered that there were African martial arts, African diasporic martial arts that had all the same concepts. There was the physical training, the diverse range of weapons, the tactics, specifically like tactics that would be encoded in poetry and songs of certain deities, and Lois and Orisha, Eshu, who is Orisha of messages, passages, dialogue between both humans, spirits, and whatnot, is also one of the warrior Orisha, and the poetry around his stories are also they're kind of like Sun Tzu's Art of War, where they're in that poetry. That's where a lot of the strategy comes into play. So there's a poem where like Eshu went to rest in the shed, but he had no room. Eshu went to rest in the palace, but he still had no room. He had no room. Eshu went to rest in the peanut shell. At last, he could stretch himself. And this idea that Eshu exists in places that are odd and like strange, not necessarily where other people exist. And from a tactical martial arts perspective, being able to exist where other people aren't comfortable, being able to maneuver where other people don't go, that is like a classic Sun Tzu strategy in terms of maneuvering. Like that whole chapter kind of like encapsulated in these poetries about a deity, that is about movement and flow and transition in between places. So that's something that like really just like holy shit, that's so cool. So that there's just been kind of this constant like layer of like every time I dig in a little bit more, there's just more to find.
I want to touch back really quick on something that you heard. We both brought up really good points, but about the problematic aspects of like Blaxploitation films, and then also like some sort of self-course correction. And I think in all genres, there's all media outlets, Blaxploitation is actually the best at doing that. So we'll start from the basis, right? We can all agree, nothing problematic and it exists in the background, right? In order for something to be problematic, it has to be detrimental. So basically, you can just follow who was happening, follow this. You follow that same line of thinking, meaning that there has to be a result. And so you can judge the source based on the result, and then using that transference, you can see whether or not it was a positive move, a progression, or is it a negative move, regression. Oh, this sounds like grad school, this is dope. But I think the fact that Blaxploitation films, you can draw a straight line from Blaxploitation films of the 70s and 80s into the hood dramas of the 90s, into the kind of resurgence in the 2000s, and the late 90s and the indies, that shows positivity. And I think the way that it did that, specifically with Blaxploitation films in the heyday in the mid and late 70s, was because they gave those same tropes that people thought they wanted, but they were still doing these subtle things, because they said people want to see black people still as cool. They still want to see them as the antagonists as well. You want to see the pimps, you want to see the dealers. But then they said, fine, we'll put that in there, but we're not going to give you Step and Fetch It. We're not going to give you Mike Jeff. If you watch things like The Mac, the consortium of pimps that meets, again, I made a little joke, but they are extremely articulate. When The Mac comes back, The Mac, if you haven't seen it, is a movie about a guy who just got out of jail. He spent he spent some time in prison, came back, finds out that he doesn't have a lot of options being an ex-felon, so decides that he's going to go into the pimping game. And then decides he uses his mind to become the king of the pimping game, becomes the Mac.
Which I do think is interesting, because even though it's a very well constructed version of what happens in our communities, it's still an authentic version of, if you come back and you're not given options, you don't have resources, you're going to create a secondary economy. And you're going to lean into that, and then what does that secondary economy do? And so I always appreciate being able to see that story, because as much as you don't want to overly spotlight what goes on in our communities, you also want to say, but this is how we got here. And if you continue to isolate this community, if you continue to make it part of a food desert, if you continue to make it an unsafe environment, the environment will figure out its version of making it safety, and will figure out its own version of doing it.
Oh yeah.
And so,
the point with the Mac specifically, in addition to that, because that was a bigger picture, it was that he himself, he was aware of the fact that what he was doing was wrong. And there's a very famous scene, I think it was lifted for either Public Enemy or maybe NWA, but someone used that audio of that scene, where he's talking to a young kid, because he shows up at the playground, he's doing, neighborhood upliftment, where he's giving out $20 bills to all the kids. And someone says, oh man, I want to be just like you. And he says, come here right now. And he goes this whole thing about, you do not want to be like me. Like, I'm doing what I have to do because I have to do it. You need to, that's not something
That's true.
That's not what they wanted in the antagonists. That's not what they wanted in drug dealers. Even in stuff like, in Shaft. Shaft is a badass. Like, plain and simple. They're like, well, we're going to give you your stereotypical guy, but he's going to fight, but not just the organized crime, not just the Latino drug runners. He's also going to fight the corrupt cops and politicians. He's going to punch a guy in the ass and knock him unconscious. That scene actually happens. He sneaks up on the dude in the subway station, punches him in the ass so hard, he passes out.
I like also another metric that I think of is I remember looking up just because I was curious who was the first female action hero that in movies and whatnot. And one of the popular things that came up the most was Sigourney Weaver in Aliens. And I thought to myself, okay, so if you consider cinema to be a fairly white dominated industry from the 1910s, going all the way to 81, and this is your first female action hero. And then I think about the window of the 70s and some movies. Let's see, we've got Coffee, we've got Foxy Brown, we've got Sugar Hill, we've got Cleopatra Jones. I did the Cleopatra Jones sequel, and those ones I know the fact that there was in just that particular time period so much more representation than across multiple decades. That no one can actually think of is a very telling difference. Even though it's still unbalanced, that level of immediate course correction where it's just we need more of this in just the first few years of this particular genre tells a lot about the overall problematicness versus correction to benefit in that particular terms.
right, and I do appreciate leaning into some of those tropes and going, okay, we're going to unschool this, where it's okay, there's already this angry black woman trope. Okay, well, she's angry for a reason, so let's just make her a vigilante. I'm I'm good for that, I'm here for that. I'm if you're already gonna say that and put this moniker on me, then it's okay, well, let me explain why I'm so pissed off, and I might as well go murder some folks. I'm good. I'm the logic of it just seemed the extension of the logic just seemed to make more sense where we're at. And even though it might have been a very linear thought process, it did at least show the background as to why these characters were doing some of this inappropriate, we'll say inappropriate, aggressive behavior. It's like, yeah, but did you see what was behind this curtain that they really had to deal with and what they got? And so I'm gonna go, here's a reason.
You
And so,
never see who hit first.
no, right? Mhm.
With, like, along with that course correction, and this takes, my example takes us into the 80s a little bit. What comes to mind for me on a longer timeline is The Last Dragon.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, like, okay, so that was another one with, like, Barry Gordy Jr. was behind that. You had freaking, Rhythm of the Night. Showing up.
Showed up.
They were super safe.
Oh my God, yeah.
They are
Showing
super
up,
safe.
and it's like, and you have time act, and like, so what that has is like, he was, for one, it addresses the like.
Do most of you know what we're talking about?
The Last Dragon?
No, okay, there's enough, there's some aggressive yeses, but there's enough not quite. So just the brief synopsis, the brief synopsis. Don't look mad that they don't know.
No. Aaron was doing a quote, and I was doing the face.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad.
So the last Dragon is an 80s take on your classic martial arts story, but set, I think it was set in Harlem.
Yeah.
Set in Harlem. Your main character is Bruce Lee, is Lever Green. Besides everyone knows as Bruce Lee, he's been studying Kung Fu for a very long time. The movie opens when he passes his last test on his master, and he's like, oh, you passed? Yeah. But shouldn't there be some kind of, there's supposed to be like a glow, an inner light that comes when you achieve that. It's like, I don't know what to tell you, I change you all the things you need to know. So the movie goes along, he meets this really cool pop star, saves her from being
Vanity.
Yeah, saves her from being kidnapped by her crazy producer to get and all of that. He also encounters a rival martial artist, Shonuff, the Shonuff. And the course of the movie is him trying to like figure out what is the next lesson he needs to learn, while also fighting like his rival Shonuff, relationship with vanity, and dealing with this like the evil plot of this crazy producer who is basically trying to exploit her talent and music and skill for himself. The movie culminates with a battle between Leroy and Shonuff, and Shonuff reveals he has the glow.
Yes.
And it's terrifying. Because like it's everything that Leroy was like afraid of, was like wanting, but like in something so dark and angry. And although I would say there's a lot of conflict in Shonuff that we can get into another time.
Yeah.
But then he's being beaten up, he's being like a crowd kicked out of him, and he's being drowned in this pool where Shonuff's like, who is the master? So he's determined that it's going to be him. And in this time, and again, this like beautiful thing is like in this time he keeps having these flashbacks of all these times where it's like, who is this master? Who is it? And he realized that it was always him. It was always, he had already changed his goals. It was only his lack of faith in himself that prevents him from actually taking his power. And he comes back out, and it is just the most, it's like Jordan was like, I'm gonna kill him. It's like, catches, I'm the master. And the glow just shows up.
Yeah.
And it's like, all the time, and it's just, and it's the amazing soundtrack starts playing, and you're just like, yes! Yes!
If anyone wonders why I miss Shannan, it's because I grew up watching characters like Shonuff, and I was like, Shannan is not enough. At least when I miss you or something. My mom did not try enough.
His style is still to this day timeless.
It is timeless. It is timeless.
Afrofuturism.
Yeah. Like,
I mean, he was like a radioactive Busta Rhymes.
Before Afro Samurai, there was Shonuff.
There is Shonuff. All right, we finally have a friend in the audience that would like to participate.
What? We have my
I know.
I know, so we had to go.
I know.
We talked. Wait, stop. No, that's not our friend. In the pink, yes.
I have a question in the comment. So the comment is Amazon Prime has Last Dragon. Oh my gosh. Oh no.
Yes.
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 Easy to find. The question is, and this doesn't have to be now, we might be getting there, but I know we're close on time. you're getting, like, the threat of blaxploitation coming forward, but where is it now? Or
Okay.
where can we find the pieces of it?
Can we pause that and then come to the front first? Because that's a very wonderful point that we kind of close on. Is that okay? Okay, yes.
Just a quick thing, because you guys were on the topic. A couple of years ago, there was an attempt by a comic book creator to do a story, not just in comic form, but also in anime form, similar to Afro Samurai, that was going to detail the life of Shogun.
I've seen it. I've seen this. There's a little cartoon where it's the beginning of like seeing the origin of Shogun.
But the last I heard, he couldn't get the full rights to it, so I don't know where
Oh,
it's at.
we'll look it up. Okay.
Oh,
We'll look it up and then write up and then we'll start an email campaign.
The state of the contemporary, like for me, that would be like Tyler Perry stuff. Well, like
Yeah, okay,
Tyler
that's
Perry,
fair.
and plus on top of that, Tyler Perry has done something that like Tyler Perry is not my favorite person. I will say that. Number one, I'm jealous that he got in Star Trek. From doing Medea, and number two, like because of religion and the Medea characters, and the Medea character, I saw it as a kind of minstrelsy.
Yeah.
I saw Tyler Perry's work as kind of minstrelsy, but then you get back to like, you know what, Step and Fetch It, like Lincoln Perry and Burton Williams did. They did what they had to do so they could do what they wanted to do. And now Tyler Perry owns a whole former airport.
And he's doing great
It's a
work.
big
It's
thing.
not Medea.
Yeah, that's not many, like he hasn't gone back to that well at all. And like nobody, like no black filmmaker since Oscar Michaud has done something on that scale.
Because I do think that blaxploitation was like when, you know, as much as I love my comedian friends, the Wayans brothers, I do think that was more in the venue of blaxploitation, what they were doing, and the I'm gonna get you suckers and all those other things. I do think that it leaned in there. But now we have got to what Tyler's creating now, what Jordan Peele's creating now, what our Ryan Coogler's are creating now. So it's less leaning towards the exploitation versus the black filmmaking.
Yeah,
And I think we have more of those opportunities.
But I think that there is a distinction between the minstrelsy and the coonery and buffoonery of Tyler Perry's early work and blaxploitation, because there are things like there's a movie Alice, which sadly is going to the same problem that blaxploitation did in the 70s, which was it is under-marketed, it was not. Alice is basically take The Village and Coffee, well, The Village by Shannan, but not shitty, and then Coffee. Together, this quick synopsis is literally, it opens, you think it's an antebellum movie, you think it's a slave movie, and it focuses on Keke Palmer as Alice, and she's an enslaved woman. And then she gets out, she runs to the edge of plantation and bursts through, and she's like, holy shit, I'm in modern times. But the context of the film, modern times is the mid-70s, and she's found by Comet, who then like briefs her on the Panthers, briefs her on Angela Davis, and she's like, well shit, I'm gonna go back and kick those plantation owners' asses. And it turns into a straight up revenge blaxploitation picture, and it's fantastic. Lord, like, I love it.
I'm gonna finish answering like the things I had. Number one series like Power, whatever. Like and also for a movie example, Proud Mary with Taraji P. Henson. Love that movie. Oh man, yeah. Like if you want to get on some Pam Grier type stuff, you're like, what's like Pam Grier but now? It's like what? Yeah. Check out Proud Mary.
And go see Alice. Seriously, it's on streaming. I don't know which streamer it's on, but Alice is dope. I'd also throw older stuff because it's the traits of blaxploitation that have carried on, not so much the texture and the flavors, but those underlying tropes and the characteristics. So things like Black Snake Moan, which is an older picture, but that's a cool magical ego trope. But Black Snake Moan is a blaxploitation picture, and that's like some deep south swamp weirdness. Justin Timberlake can't get it up because Christina Ricci is banging everybody, so you need. Samuel L. Jackson is not acting in this movie. They just showed up to his house. every single scene, he's like, what the? He's pissed off. He's a blues musician whose blues has the power to cure nothing.
I was going to suggest a show right now that I really appreciate, and I cannot remember the name. It was the Amazon Prime show about the 15-foot kid, the kid who's like 15. I'm a Virgo, yeah. So I do think that that's worth watching, you know, kind of thing. And again, where are we going with the way that we handle characters now? That is one of the ones where we can get there farther. Yes.
That rule blaxploitation. Sorry about that. That's work
Sorry, okay, where should we start? Jim, not you, because we know Jim, so let's start in the back first. Yes, Brian?
What did you guys think of the blackening?
Haven't
Okay.
watched it yet.
Yeah,
Haven't
Black-
seen it.
What? Oh, yes.
Okay, I don't like horror, but I loved the sketch when they first started working on the blackening. So the fact that they were able to expand it to a full film when it was like a 5-minute short, I'm like, that's all the jokes, right? And the fact that they managed to expand it, I'm a big fan.
It was
See that movie. That movie is goddamn hilarious. And it's so smart at the same time. It is so good. Just, if anyone asks you if you trust them, don't open your mouth. Unless it's not a spoiler, just unless you like Molly. Don't.
Yeah.
I mean, we all like Molly, right?
Yes.
Well, shit, we recorded. I mean,
They're recording the whole time.
MDMH is really bad.
Okay, stop. All right. So we had in front of in the red collars. Like, didn't you have a comment? On something?
It's time.
Yeah, we're out of time.
It's fine. Are you trying to silence the all-black days?
I think we could do a lightning round, real quick. Okay, what is your comment, and then we can talk about it afterwards.
The
So,
yellow.
I was just gonna ask about the Blaxploitation female vigilante film as contrasted with things like I Spit on Your Grave and other female vigilante films that came out of the white film.
okay, we will table that. Okay, over here in the card we have.
Real fast, I just wanted to know, are there any quotes from your favorite movies that you use like in everyday?
Oh, got you. Okay, and Jim, what was yours? No. Okay, cool. Right here it is.
Sorry. I just had a question in regards to what you guys' thoughts were on remakes of predominantly white films, like The Wizard of Oz, and then there was a African-American version of The Wiz, Still Magnolias. Just what your guys' thoughts on the trend of it, and if that's positive, negative.
How about we do lightning round? Okay, I'll take my friend question here, and then somebody can handle the spin and the grave question, and then somebody can do quotes, and I feel like y'all will do
I'll do
quotes.
quotes.
Okay, all right, so cool. One of the things that I do think was interesting about the genre is that it did what all of our genres do. It took things that were properties that we care about and they recreated it, like we had Blackula Black in the day. So I am good with us trying, now that we have budgets, to redo some of these films, and especially now that we can broaden them out and do decent graphics and do CGI. And if we're gonna have all these Disney movies remade, I would like to see some of these remade with an appropriate budget and see what they have, and especially now that there's some filmmakers that might have grown up watching it and would be able to use it as inspiration. So I would love to see more of that done and properly funded and properly being able to perform with some of the wonderful talent that we have built. Cool. All right, next. Okay, one more time in the red.
So how do contrast like the revenge stories like coffee like Spill Out Your Grave?
The intent of the picture is the big difference. The differentiating factor is something like I Spit in Your Grave. The idea is about the titillation of the gory scenes. So the reason why the extreme violence and the revenge is nowhere near the same stuff that you're going to get in I Spit in Your Grave. So like in Coffee, yeah, she's killing people, she's shooting people, she's stabbing people, but that's about it. I Spit in Your Grave, we're talking about like mutilation, we're talking about like putting guys' heads in microwaves and stuff like that. You're not going to see the tale of someone getting justice or vengeance. You're going to see, it's kind of like Splatterhouse, it's a horror movie. You want the titillation, the actual exploitation without the blood.
So it's like, it's not even really an action movie, it's a horror movie in a different context.
Yes. Well, I'd have to say that my knowledge of scientific biological transmogrification is only outmatched by my zest for Kung Fu Shunchery. I quote both classic and remade Blaxploitation films all the time.
Of course you do.
That is still, because again, these are characters that I related to, that were very, that gave me a lot of inspiration about the kind of person I would want to be. So yeah, the quotes come out very, very smoothly. Plus, and every so often, I will get like a really good rhyme in something I'm saying, and it's just like great every time.
Yes. So we are at time. So okay.
We told you it was gonna happen.
What does everybody else have to do? So real quick, where are we gonna be?
I have another panel at 7 p.m. The unpopular positive opinions panel. Today's
Today's
Saturday.
Saturday.
Yeah, right. That's my question.
I'll be choosing between traditional and indie publishing at 5, which is somewhere over here. It's on the 4th floor. I'm on a lot of panels, walk into a room. I'm sorry,
At 7, I will be on Self-Made Superheroes. I'll be talking actually a lot more about martial arts training, in particular African martial arts. I'm a bit on the blade kick today, so there'll be a lot of that. Then after that night, there's going to be an impromptu Across the Spider-Verse fan panel at 10. We got that in, so I'll be there as well.
I saw that you posted that. If you are not into the Spider-Verse, you can also come see me and Reverend Matt Kesson, and then we can also see Ben Sandella. We will be performing on Wordslinger's Way at 10 p.m. But if we didn't get to anything, please follow us on all the socials. All of us are out there. We would love to talk to you about this. This is all stuff that we would talk about to infinity. So, anything else?